My name is Katie Braun, and I am an Earth Systems Geographer who studies permafrost thaw in the Arctic. Today, I definitely identify as a scientist, but that wasn't always true. It took me a while to really realize I was a scientist. I had this idea that a scientist was this perfect, meticulous person, white coat, working in a lab, never making a mistake, and I just never identified as that. But then I realized doing this work, a scientist is really anyone who asks questions about the world and then tries to answer those questions. And that's definitely what I do. I started college knowing that I wanted to do something in the sciences and something with the outdoors. I always really enjoyed my science classes. I remember specifically in the fourth grade, we had a unit on the oceans, and we all got to make like a paper model of a different ocean creature, and I got to make this like deep sea shrimp out of shimmery paper, and I just loved it. I thought it was so interesting. But I really had no idea what I wanted to do. I came into my undergraduate education undecided, and I just happened to be looking through the catalog of all of the different majors and things you could do, and I found that in the earth sciences there was this thing about how if you wanted to use biology and chemistry and physics and math to understand the world, then that's what earth science is. And that just sounded really exciting to me. Today, I study thawing permafrost in the Arctic. Permafrost is ground that is perennially frozen, so areas where the ground never thaws, it's always frozen. Permafrost happens in the Arctic, so in the northernmost part of our planet. The Arctic is not always frozen. Permafrost is always frozen, but permafrost isn't actually on the surface of the Earth. It's a little bit underneath it. The topmost layer of the Earth in the Arctic thaws every summer, and that's where we have soil and microbes that allow plants to grow that feed all of the other animals and life in the Arctic, things like caribou, foxes, muskox, and polar bears. The permafrost, if you would dig a hole, is a couple feet deeper. You would dig, and then hit something that feels like concrete. And that's the totally frozen soil, rock, and organic material that makes up permafrost. I work for most of the year in a lab, but then in the summer I do field work in the Arctic. So I'll take a very long plane ride up there and then spend my days looking at permafrost. I use different remote sensing tools like drones and satellites. I collect soil and plant samples to study how the Earth is changing and to see where permafrost is thawing, to help me answer these questions about why is permafrost thawing and what's going to happen in the future. Studying permafrost is important because climate change is warming the Arctic and the permafrost is thawing. So as the permafrost thaws, you can think of it like an ice cream cake melting and then forming into this new bumpy surface. So we have different plants growing in different places. You have water pooling into these new bumps and divots, and the whole landscape is changing into a new state. One important skill in my current work is being curious. So I'm always asking questions. Why is this plant over here? Why is this pond getting bigger and bigger? What is this place going to look like in 10, 20, or 30 years? Because doing science is all about asking those questions and then coming up with creative ways to answer them. I get really excited about making maps because I think maps are this really powerful tool that we can use to see what's happening in some place that might be really far away or really unfamiliar, like the Arctic. I map where permafrost thaw is happening so we can better understand why it's thawing and then understand what's going to happen in the future. It can be difficult to think about the scale of climate change and all of the challenges that we're facing with climate change. But at the same time, I think it's important to really understand those challenges so that we can be motivated to fix them. And now these are questions from students who recently attended a digital discovery workshop at PacSci. Brooklyn in third grade asks, is it ever sunny in the Arctic? The answer is yes, it is sunny in the Arctic. In the summer, the sun never sets in the Arctic. Some days it might be cloudy or foggy, but the sun is always up over the horizon. If you were to wake up in the middle of the night and look outside, it would look just as bright as it is during midday. The place where I work in Alaska, Utqiagvik, has 65 days of polar night where the sun never rises. It is always dark outside. But then in the summer, they have several months of polar day where the sun never sets. Nadir in 5th grade asks, do you get to fly the drones or satellites? I fly the drones, but not the satellites. Most of the time, we use drones to survey the landscape. So we actually use an autopilot to fly those surveys because it keeps the drone flying perfectly straight so we can get really nice data out of it. But other times, I get to fly the drone myself, and that is very fun. Henry in 6th grade asks, how do you get satellite photos? There are a lot of different satellites orbiting our planet, and they're owned by different companies and groups. Some of those satellites, like the one named Landsat, are publicly available for anyone to use. Other images from satellites you have to get by asking special permission from groups like NASA. If you're interested in looking at these satellite photos, check out the link in the description. This is a satellite photo from Utqiagvik. Milana in 3rd grade asks, how long does it take for the ground to melt? There are two main types of permafrost thaw. There's gradual thaw, where the whole landscape is slowly thawing as the Earth warms. And then there's abrupt thaw, which can happen over just a few hours or days in response to something like a heat wave or a big rainstorm. Marissa in 6th grade asks, can plants grow in permafrost? Plants grow on top of permafrost in something called the active layer. This is the portion of ground in the Arctic that in the summer thaws and turns into nice soil, just like what you would see here. And plants are able to grow in that active layer and feed the rest of the Arctic. So this active layer is often pretty shallow, only a foot or two deep. And that means big plants like trees can't grow in the Arctic, but instead we see lots of things like grasses and small flowers, and even miniature shrubs. For anyone who's curious about learning more about our planet, I want you to know that there's more than one way you can do science. I make maps and go in the field to study these places. Other people work in a lab, or they work with computers, with data, with numbers. If we're wanting to learn more about our planet's climate, we really need to all work together with our different skill sets and different interests, because the questions we're trying to answer are too big for any one person to answer by themselves. We have to work together. Thanks so much for watching. Stay curious.